Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ishan Mosin, and I am the Director of Pre-Nursing and Pre-Physician Assistant Programming. It is my pleasure to moderate this allopathic and osteopathic medical school admissions panel this morning. I would like to thank AAMC for sponsoring this event and allowing it to be viewed online worldwide. The questions I have here today have been collected from our online forums and social media through submissions from pre-medical students nationwide. If you would like to submit a question of your own, please use Facebook or Twitter with the hashtag UCDPHSA14, and popular questions will be integrated live into the panel. Before I begin, each distinguished panelist should please introduce themselves, give their title, and the institution they represent, starting from my right.
My name is Vidal Dickerson. I serve as Director of Student Life, which encompasses admissions and student affairs with the University of Colorado School of Medicine.
Hi, I'm Cary Jewkes. I'm from the University of Vermont College of Medicine, and I'm the Director of Medical Student Admissions.
Good morning. My name is Garland Jarmon. I am the Director of Admissions for the Creighton University School of Medicine in Omaha, Nebraska.
Good morning. I'm Gina Smith, Director of Admissions and Recruitment at Moines University College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Stephan Kimble. I'm the Director of Admissions for the M.D. program for Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay, thank you. So the way we're gonna do the questions is I'll ask a question and then you guys can answer down the line, very systematic. And once a question has been fully answered, then I'll go on to the next question. So for our first question, what is a trend that you see amongst the applicants, either it be academic, extracurricular, and what should future applicants do in response to that? Mr. Dickerson?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. What is a trend that you see among applicants, either it be academic or extracurricular, and what should future applicants do in response to that?
Yeah, trends. Very loaded. I think what we're seeing, interestingly, at University of Colorado, actually students with backgrounds in engineering. We're seeing a great pool of students actually transition and imagine themselves serving in healthcare in very different ways. So much so that we've actually begun to partner with a number of academic programs, even a graduate program in bioengineering. And so it's just been fascinating to see that that pool of students with that different academic background, even if it's a career changer, transition into medicine. We tend to see, I think, the same types of experiences that other schools as well. Students tend to be involved in global experiences. Students tend to be leaders on campus. So it's really tough to create a formula, particularly as it relates to provide advice on how students should prepare. I really think they should be engaging in different opportunities that really are aligned with how they imagine themselves serving. And so I think that's the best advice I can provide. But trends, more so academic diversity, that we're beginning to see in great ways. So knowing that there is a place for individuals despite their academic backgrounds.
I'm having trouble with that button. I think that we have always had a very diverse student background as far as life experiences that people have brought. We've had traditionally been very receptive to non-traditional students. So that seems to be a trend that I think the trends come in what you value as a school. So it sort of comes across that way. So we tend to have a lot of people involved in public health, a lot of things working with the community. And so we tend to look for students who are doing those kinds of activities. And they tend to be the most successful. And I would say that, as far as academically, it's a wide range. It's really what people bring to the table. We look for a wide variety of experiences, just because that enriches our community as well.
I think for us, it's very similar to what they're saying. You'll see a lot of the schools are similar that way, that we look for students who bring a lot of different things to our institution, be it diversity from cultural or geographic. When it comes down to academic backgrounds, we love to see students with liberal arts backgrounds in addition to the science backgrounds, because it just adds to your academic history, which is always a positive for us, and then also gives you more cultural competency is important too, so being able to work with people from different backgrounds. We'll have that in medical school, but having those experiences be either through service or global experiences, so on and so forth. It's just an addition and really helps you as you're going through medical school. Academically, most students, we always encourage them to do as well as they can. Find your niche, find the things that you love, your passion, and run with those, and that's just going to really enhance your application and make you a very well-rounded and competitive student.
At DMU, I think we are seeing a trend lately of students that are taking an intentional year off, a gap year, less so due to being underprepared, and more so due to students just knowing all of the additional aspects that they need to basically over-prepare for their application. So an intentional year off while they are continuing to do clinical work, maybe take science coursework, a lot of students that are traveling internationally to do mission work, and so it's not viewed as a negative in our program because students are being quite intentional about it, and they're really making a really great use of that year in between when they graduate undergrad and when they're applying.
Ditto. Pretty much. At Vanderbilt University, one of the trends that we've also noticed is that our applicant pool is becoming more interdisciplinary in all sense of that word. So we'll have students that have majors that pull from different subject areas. We'll have students who want to do different things, like they might want to work in the business sector for a little bit, do like healthcare consulting before they apply, like in their transition year. Or they, had an interdisciplinary major, or they want to just accomplish a whole lot of things. They don't necessarily want to be on this hamster wheel kind of perpetuating moving forward of, okay, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this in order to get into medical school. So we really do value those students that have that diversity when they apply to medical school.
What are some common errors that you see in applications, and are there any misconceptions about the application process that you would like to clarify? Sorry.
And I'll try to condense. I think most commonly is a disconnect in terms of the application, then eventually what we see in terms of the student and our interaction with the student. I think what's powerful about our applications really are the personal statements, and particularly the experiences that are aligned with that. We joke in the office that at certain points the applicants begin to look alike, particularly if you look at the metrics and then sometimes experiences. We have a lot of smart people applying to medical school. But it's something about the personal statement, how you articulate your values and interests in your pursuit. And then if you look at activities, and those activities and involvements are actually married to how you articulate who you are. There's something about developing this full picture when we're reviewing, particularly when we haven't engaged with a student yet. And I think that's really critical. Not necessarily accumulating different experiences for the sake of filling lines within an MCAT application, but does your story, your activities make sense, and can we develop a picture? And I think many times when our applicants are applying, they're not considering that we need a full picture, particularly as we invest more and more in holistic review. Your high scores just won't sell. The high scores, high metrics, and what else? We want to know who you are and what you can actually bring into our community. And I think that disconnect many times when students are just filling an application and not necessarily thinking about you are actually beginning the development of a picture of who you are. I think it's really critical.
I really love what you just said because I totally agree. And I always tell people it's like you're telling your story, and you're the only person who can tell that story. And you have to make a story compelling. You have to make people want to read it. The personal statement, I've read so many of them, and they all sort of blend together, but there's maybe 5 or 6 out of the 15 years that I've been reading them that I can still remember. I still know the students' names. I still know where they ended up in medical school. Not all of them ended up with me, but I wanted them all. And it's such an opportunity to be able to tell your story in the only way that you can tell it. And I think a lot of times people just, they make it polished and they make it sort of a reiteration of all the activities that you've done, but you don't tell your story and why you need to be a doctor. And it's such an opportunity to make yourself stand out because it does all sort of blend together at the end. But if you can make yourself stand out, and that's your opportunity to do it, it's a really great thing to take care of. As far as, what was the other part of the question?
Misconceptions.
The misconceptions. Gosh, I can't think of any offhand, but come back to it.
I completely agree with everything they've said. I think you're going to hear us say that quite a bit. I'm going to go a completely different way when talking about errors. I'm going to be a little more practical with the application process itself. The keynote speaker before us says that you need to know the rules, which are completely true. Those are your responsibilities. All of us will have different requirements. They're similar, but there's enough differences because of who we are as a medical school, what our mission is, what our characteristics are, who we look for student applicants. Due to that, we have different requirements, so you need to know that. One big thing is letters, recommendations. Well, some schools want something, some schools want something else. You need to be researching that so you can ensure that you're supplying the correct information to the school. Same with academic requirements. Ensure that your curriculum and courses you completed is well-rounded enough that you're covering the different schools you want to apply to, because we get so many applications, we can't really give a lot of, we can't waive different requirements for students because other students have met our requirements. We can't waive it for you. So that's one of the rules that you have to follow and you need to know. So that's one error that we see in the application. Misconception. I think a great thing about this is that you're hearing from directors of admissions. We like to talk to you. We like to form relationships with you. A lot of people, even at my institution, when I go talk to undergrads, they're like, "You're going to meet with me? Why? I didn't think that you guys talked to us." We want you to understand the process. We want to be a resource for you. Contact us if you have questions. There's a lot of different information out there. The thing is, every case, every application is different. Everyone needs different information. So you might have a friend who contacted us and they tell you what we told them, but you might need different advice. So contact us so we can make sure we're giving the correct advice to you. And use your resources, your pre-auth advisors, the admissions counselors, so on and so forth. We just want to be a resource for you.
Well, I think he just summed up most of what I was thinking of saying and sharing. That's okay. But I'll just echo that we encourage students to contact the schools directly and don't necessarily rely on information that you've heard here and there. Requirements do change at schools and procedures do change. And so just because a former classmate or a peer was able to work their way through the application process the year prior based on a certain set of criteria doesn't mean that that's necessarily the case for you. Your situation may be different. Your friend or your classmate's situation may be different. So it is very much an important part of the process to investigate each of the schools that you are applying to and not assume that the process is the same each year or each applicant, and to not necessarily believe everything that you read online. Thanks.
Ditto again. One thing I do want to stress, though, is everybody repeat after me, okay? Rolling admissions. Okay, one more time. Rolling admissions. This is critical, okay? For us, the deadline to submit the AMCAS application is November the 1st. That does not mean on November 2nd we go, okay, let's crack open AMCAS and look at everybody who's applied. We have been giving admissions, our interview offers, from the word go, you know? And unfortunately, we see a lot of great candidates who, for some reason, hesitate to hit that submit button on AMCAS. And at that point in time, a lot of our interview offers are already full. So, like for us at Vanderbilt, we finished interviewing January 30th. We're done. So if you submit your AMCAS application October 31st, you really hurt yourself in our admissions process. So make sure you don't dilly-daddle with your admissions application, okay? Don't self-sabotage by holding on to this, or, you know, you get all these secondaries and they're just sitting there in your inbox collecting dust. As soon as you get a secondary, I mean, obviously be mindful of the school's secondary deadline, but don't let it sit there for weeks on end, you know? At most, you might have 2 to 5 additional essay questions to respond to. work on that. I mean, I always tell my students, don't let that sit there for more than a week, okay? Just really stay on target with that. So rolling admissions is very important. It's a common error. The other thing, and kind of to hit upon the letter evaluation thread, we have a lot of great applicants who will apply to Vanderbilt, tons. And you guys look very similar on paper. You guys have all taken the same prerequisites, did shadowing and volunteer work and all that good stuff and everything like that, you know. But for us, we put a lot of weight in letters of evaluation. That's what kind of our peers at your undergraduate institution have said about you. That's what the organic chemistry professor thought about you. That's what your PI in the research lab thought about you. So we put a lot of weight in those letters. And I cannot begin to tell you how many great applicants we pass on because we don't know anything more about them from their evaluators, okay? Case in point, once again, it depends on the medical school you're applying to, but for us, if you've done research and you do not have a letter from your PI, your research mentor in that lab, that's a red flag to us, you know? So I would definitely recommend cultivating strong relationships. One tip I would have for you, if you Google AAMC Letter of Evaluation Guidelines, you'll see kind of what the AAMC has encouraged medical schools to start looking at in regards to letters of evaluation. Not every medical school is going to require that template or that combination of letters, but it allows applicants and even letter writers to have some sort of direction as to what to write about in a letter of evaluation. So definitely make sure you're cultivating good letters. When you ask somebody to write a letter, don't just say, hey, can you write my med school letter? And they're like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll do that. Ask them if they are willing to write a strong letter of support for your candidacy to medical school, okay? If they waver, if they hem and haw, you know right there it's not going to be a strong letter of support, okay? We don't want to read letters that say, you know, hi, I'm Dr. Smith. I teach organic chemistry at XYZ University. My class is the hardest school at our institution. In organic chemistry, we cover blah, 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 blah. That's not helpful for us, okay? We want to read a letter that says, you know, Susie is applying to medical school cycle. I've worked with her as organic chemistry professor. She took the initiative to do blah, blah, blah. You know, that's the stuff that we like to see.
Thank you. Ms. Jewkes, this question is for you. Considering the upcoming change in the MCAT, how will you compare an applicant with an older MCAT score to an applicant with a newer MCAT score?
I wish I had a good answer. I don't know because we don't know what people are going to look like. They are assuring us that their people are going to mostly be in a very small window. We're going to look at both. We're going to compare. We're going to take what we know from the old and compare it to the new if people have both or if people have one or the other. We will accept the old one for 3 years just to make sure that people have been able to take the test that they feel most comfortable with. But really, in a way, you can think maybe it's going to be really great to take the new one because there's nothing to compare it against, so you might look really great. But then again, it might be safer to stay with what you know and what we know. But it'll be interesting to see. We have a committee of 15 faculty members and students, so it'll be interesting to see how they read it as well.
Would anyone like to expand on that?
I can't hear you for the reverberation. Expand on that, okay. I agree. Once again, we don't have a concordance table saying that a 30 of the old MCAT is equitable to a 500 on the new MCAT. The AAMC has been very intentional not to provide any kind of concordance tables for us. So what we are probably going to look at a little bit more at Vanderbilt is your percentile score on those sections. So the March and April MCAT test takers, we won't get their percentile rankings until mid to end of June for the new MCAT because it has to be normed a little bit with those groups that are taking it. So once we have that and we see that a 500 is in the, I'm just making this up here, like the 75th percentile or whatever, now we have some direction on where we're going with the score reports, okay? So that's kind of what we're moving towards, but what I've told people is we're all in this together, you know? You guys are all taking a new MCAT that, you know, this is the 5th revision of this test that's been around for almost 100 years. So this is a pretty massive, turnover for this new MCAT. All of the medical schools are just kind of working our way through it too. We've got a meeting scheduled in November, the AAMC meeting in Chicago. This will be a topic of discussion for us, and we're all working on this together. It's not like one medical school has the secret to what the new MCAT's going to look like, and one undergraduate campus has it figured out, and everybody else is going to be kind of messed over if they're not one of those 2 schools. But we'll work on it together.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith, this question is for you. In terms of extracurricular activities, which is preferred, depth or variety?
Both? Is that a suitable answer? I think we look for students to have a variety of experiences, but in my personal opinion, the depth of the commitment to an activity. So if a student has shadowed with 93 different providers and spent, 2 hours with each one, certainly that's a variety, but they haven't gone any deeper than just that, 2 hours that they spent there. I would rather see a student has made a sustained commitment to a specific activity, whether it is shadowing or a campus club or something like that. But I would rather see that a student had been part of a club for multiple years rather than just kind of bounce around and do minor activities here and there. Certainly a little bit of everything, it does fill up the application, and it has page after page after page of extracurriculars and experiences, but I would rather see a student that had done maybe just a few things but had committed to them over a much longer period of time. That's just my personal opinion, though.
Mr. Jarmon, this question is for you. What are the best tips for students on the day of their interview?
Okay, so the question is, what are the best tips on the day of interview? First off, just some normal requirements for interview. You're gonna be wearing a suit. For women, it could be a pantsuit or skirt suit, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be black or gray. You can use different colors, that's okay. Guys, the same way, you'll be in a suit. So if you haven't worn a suit before, if you don't have any dress clothes, definitely get those. Wear it before you come, because we'll notice if you're not comfortable in the shoes, if you haven't cut the tags off correctly, things like that. And you laugh, but on Friday, someone didn't have their tags cut correctly. So those are things that we look at too. You want to be yourself. Review your AMCAS application, because you might have open file interviews. They might be MMIs. You should know the type of interview you're going into, because the schools are pretty open about that. If it's open file interviews, know your AMCAS, because they'll pull questions from there. Know yourself, know the reason why you want to be a physician. We ask that question all the time, and students stumble on that. So big hint there. Think about it, reflect on it. What's going to be the reason, why do you want to go on this journey for 4 years? And then residency, and then maybe fellowship, then practicing for the rest of your life in this career. Why do you want to do that? And be able to articulate that in an interview. It's not something that you have to practice, but you should know yourself why this is your calling, why this is your vocation. Okay. And then other than that, you need to, if the schools offer you the opportunity to ask questions, do that. Get to know the school as much as they're trying to get to know you, because this might be the only time you're on campus. Talk to their students, talk to their faculty, ask the questions over and over again, because you'll get different perspectives, different ideas from people, so you can really make the decision on, is this the best fit for me? Because that's what we're trying to figure out. Are you the best fit for our campus? You need to figure out, are we the best fit for you? Are we gonna help you achieve your goals? So some things that we tell students every Friday and Saturday when we interview, I think those are the best hints that we can give you.
Would anyone else like to expand on that question?
Really quickly. And I'll keep it very simple in the statement. Basically, be able to speak to whatever you prepare in your package. That could be your application or the physical package that you're actually bringing. We don't have very tight rules in terms of attire, but wouldn't it make sense if you wore a Daffy Duck tie, that someone will ask you about that, and you should be able to speak to that? Is there something tied to that? Or are you just trying to be provocative? So there's a lot that, and I talked about the disconnect early on. Make sure that what you're presenting to us is aligned with who you are and then the picture you wanted to create for us.
I'd like to add one other thing also. At Vanderbilt, there will be about 15 of you interviewing on interview day. We're looking to see how well you gel with your future classmates. If you're kind of standing off in the corner, texting your BFF and stuff like that, I mean, it just looks like you're just not here in the moment. You're not interested in making connections. Our curriculum is very team-oriented because that's the way healthcare is moving. And so if you appear to be, quote, socially awkward, that's kind of a red flag for us. The other thing is also, are you asking questions of the medical school students, our current medical students that we put in front of you? Are you asking questions of your interviewer when they say, so do you have any questions for us about Vanderbilt? And if you say, nope, we want you to ask questions. It's a two-way street. The interview is not us, putting you in a chair, in a metal chair in a big room and putting a spotlight on you and interrogating you all day. We want to see that you connect with us. You're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you. So the personal engagement connection is very important.
This next question is for you, Mr. Dickerson. Sometimes undergraduate grades are determined by a particular professor and not the course itself. So how do medical schools take that into consideration?
Grades determined by professor?
Yeah, instead of the course.
I don't think we have a capacity to even examine that. When you think about the experience of individual professors and their distinct styles, I don't know if we can examine that because we don't have that type of information, but I'll speak broadly about grades themselves, particularly if students are concerned that that is an issue for them. We find a number of students that may have tricky transitions into first and second year that may have an impact on their CUME. What my best advice that I can provide is, as I said, make it a part of the story. If you think that that's something that we'll be reviewing and you think that'll be an issue of concern, and you don't think those scores represent who you are, go ahead and put it on the table and represent that, either in your personal statement or articulate that in some way that we can better understand that. We have so many different institutions that are applying, or students representing different institutions. It's hard to develop weight in terms of not only just institutions themselves, but respective courses. So that's tricky. So at the local level, it's just becoming accustomed with the style and approach of this instructor and take advantage of office hours to make sure that you're giving the instructor what she or he wants. But broadly, particularly if you have those concerns about metrics, take advantage of even post-bac opportunities, whatever you want to do to kind of expand your package. But if particularly you had a tough transition that had an impact on your metrics, speak to that. Be able to speak to that, be comfortable, and just recognize that that's a part of your journey. But I've encouraging students particularly just make it a part of their story. When we're reviewing that, and that's all that we have, go ahead and add that element. That again, these scores don't represent my potential, and these are other pieces of my application, my experiences that make me a qualified candidate. Okay.
This next question is for all the panelists. I'll start with Ms. Kimble and work down the line. Many institutions offer financial aid, but what are some other outside resources that applicants should seek?
So for us, our financial aid process is similar to a lot of other medical schools. We will encourage all of you guys to fill out the FAFSA form starting in January. Even if you're not accepted at that time, go ahead and get the FAFSA ball rolling. List us as one of your schools. We don't think you're being presumptuous if you list us as a school and you haven't been accepted yet. Once you are accepted, you'll fill out the profile form, which is our secondary application for financial aid. That's for our need-based funding line. We do have a financial counselor who can kind of talk through all your options and situations with you. We also have a very robust merit-based scholarship program. at Vanderbilt because we think it's important to acknowledge your accomplishments in the application process. Outside of that, we do have students who will seek out additional funding lines, and so one of the things that they'll sometimes do is think creatively about some of the affiliations that they have. It might be their social sorority, it might be their religious organization, cultural groups, things of that nature, and just kind of create not a network necessarily, but maybe like a net web, and so there's going to be kind of like tangents and webs and stuff like that to think who might be able to help fund some of your decision to attend medical school. One thing that's important to remember is that when you are applying for financial aid programs, a lot of them will do a credit check, so you want to make sure that your credit looks pretty good now because you don't want any kind of unwelcome surprises when you are actually going through the process. Identity theft is rampant. You want to make sure nobody has taken advantage of that with you. Sometimes that college students have been in kind of a bubble. They haven't needed their credit checked very often. And sometimes, unsavory characters have taken advantage of that. Also, sometimes students will run up high credit card debt because they put their MCAT prep course on there, their application fees, things like that. So just make sure you don't have a whole lot of outstanding debt and stuff, and that will help your loan package be a little bit more reasonable with that. And then also look at the cost of living at the different cities that you're going to be going to for medical school. The cost of living in one city might be a lot lower than the cost of living in another, unless you have somebody in that city you're planning on living with, you're going to be rolling in your cost of living expenses into your medical school debt. And so like a one-bedroom apartment might be $700 in one city, and it might be $1,500 in another per month. So just factor all that information in as you're making those decisions.
Well, I think we probably all have relatively similar processes in terms of financial aid. The majority of students are utilizing federal financial aid to fund the majority of their education. We do have a number of scholarship opportunities at DMU that are merit-based as well. Students are identified during the acceptance process, and the admission committee makes recommendations on scholarship candidates. We have several full tuition scholarships and half tuition scholarships that are renewable for students that stay in the top quarter of their class, I believe. Those can be renewed for up to 4 years. We also have a number of students that are interested in giving back to a community, whether it's the community that they grew up in or another rural community that they are interested in providing for. So there are a number of different scholarship opportunities, both through the university and through most state organizations, for students that are interested in serving a rural community or an underserved community following residency. And many of those have basically a year-for-year system where a student is, they're taking financial aid, they're paying for school up front, but then they're committing to serving this underserved population for a certain number of years following residency. And there are forgivable loan programs. We've seen students that have had their entire student debt of, $200,000 plus be forgiven for 3 to 5 years of service in a underserved community. So those are things that I encourage students to look into. You can't discount the fact that being able to be free of all medical school debt would be absolutely huge. I think many students could commit to working in any community, any environment, if it meant a debt-free future that they could, build for themselves and their families.
They provide great information. Additional things would be outside scholarships would be, for instance, the military has some wonderful scholarships for students. National Health Service Corps is a really good program. And as I said, as she mentioned also, a lot of different service programs, and they'll do debt relief too, which I think are wonderful programs for you to look into. It's a lot of research on the student's part to go in and find these different opportunities. Definitely the financial aid advisors at our different institutions will assist you to the best of our ability, but most of our students are going to be on loans, and then of course we all have scholarships, and then those outside scholarships are very helpful too. But one thing I want to touch on that she mentioned at the beginning, the application process can get a little expensive. you're doing your AMCAS application, you're doing secondaries that have additional costs, you're flying around doing interviews, you're staying at hotels, maybe renting cars, so on and so forth. That can add up to debt, especially if you put it on a credit card. We always tell our students who come to interview to, as she mentioned too, try to decrease the amount of debt that you have before you come in. You might want to talk to your families and friends about helping to dissuade that cost by giving gifts for interviews. It helps out really well, just to decrease that cost, because the less debt you come in with, the less debt you have to worry about on the back end. Because the way we have to look at it is that anything that you pay with your loans while you're in medical school is like using your credit card. If you have to use your credit card to pay on another credit card that you had before, it's just adding on debt. So just things to think about. We talk about financial planning right away during interview day, and these are different concepts that we give our students to think about. So when you're going on interviews, you can actually, as she mentioned, think about cost of living, the debt I'm coming in with, so on and so forth. How can I decrease this? Family and friends are great, especially with also, you can't save enough money for medical school. It's not possible. We understand that. But there's different ways to decrease it by having, as she mentioned, rent might be a little less in one place than another. Maybe your family would be happy to pay your deposit. That's a huge plus for your apartment. Maybe help you buy some clothes when you're coming in, help your travel expenses. Those little things are huge on the back end. So any way that you can be a little more creative to decrease your debt on the front end is going to help you on your back end with your loan debt.
And just sort of building on that, there are a lot of little scholarships out there that you can apply for that are local, that are easier to get than the big national scholarships. And, just piling it on little by little can help a lot at the end, as Garmin was saying. And also really be informed, like when they give you all those loans that they're going to give you, read them, know the terms, know what you're getting into. You don't have to accept everything that they offer you either, so make an informed decision. And then there's always new programs coming on board for the loan forgiveness thing. For example, I heard of one that's being announced, I think, next week about the Veterans Administration, and it's going to offer students $120,000 towards their medical school debt. So just knowing that those things are going to be coming up, but being smart about what loans you do take. And of course, we know that everybody does take loans and has to, but we try to offer scholarships and institutional loans as well as the federal loans.
Yes, and yes. I'll just emphasize lifestyle, because it's and you heard a little bit about that, but just actually modifying your spending. That's not only to help you accumulate a few dollars, but also you're not making six figures when you're a medical student. It's a different style of living that, particularly for those of you who are accustomed to weekly checks or salary, it's a big adjustment. And we find that not only for students, but even for those that may be coming along with them, if you contribute financially in any way. But just looking at your lifestyle and saving away and giving to yourself, and then accessing those that love you to come along with you, modify those gifts. Can we see green more so than any type of item? Also, make sure you're still investigating while you're in medical school. I think you're investigating scholarships and different aid to a certain point, but also there will be opportunities that become available when you're actually a student. So make sure you're always investigating these opportunities, even as you transition in as a medical student. I think are really critical. But I agree with every element in terms of resources.
Thank you. So this next question is again for all the panelists, but this time we'll go in reverse order. What are some aspects of medical school that applicants usually do not consider but should?
Difference in lifestyle. Of course, you hear about academic demand, you'll read about that, it's just a different volume. But I do think what we've been definitely trying to help our students with are considering those that love them and are coming along with them. And so again, it's not just you as you're investigating, but do you actually have individuals who understand what you're about to enter, the time demand? Do you understand what this is going to mean in terms of family commitments? And I think that's an element our students sometimes miss as they're individually going about the application and individually going through the interview and individually transitioning in. We have a number of people who surround you and supporting you that are transitioning as well. And sometimes how they support you may need to change. And so you are an educator. You need to also make sure that they understand the expectations of the institution and prepare those that are coming along with you. I think is one item in addition addition to other layers that I really want to emphasize to students.
And just to sort of build on that, I think that a lot of students get shocked when they come to medical school because it's really hard and it's really different than undergraduate, and people don't talk about that enough, I don't think. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress. And so the support that you have from your family and from the people that you're in school with is really critical. You can get through it. We think that the people that we interview are all capable of handling it, but it's a lot, and you have to be prepared for that as well.
And I'm going to build on to what she said with, we all are right now, but due to the fact that the academic rigor is really something you haven't experienced before when you get to medical school. You might have done really well in undergrad, really well in high school, and then you get to medical school and you fail your first test. Mm-hmm. This happens to everyone. You're not going to fail medical school because of that. However, how you react to that experience is going to push you forward. Every medical school will have support systems set up, academic support systems set up for you, tutoring, mentoring, so on and so forth. You might not have ever had to use these resources before because you're really great students. You'll use them in medical school. Take advantage of them. Students think, well, is it bad of me? Am I a bad student because I have to use these resources? No, you're a smart student because it's there and it's going to help you succeed. Mm-hmm. So take advantage of those experiences. You might have to change the way that you study, and you've never thought about that before because it's just a different experience. So be open to those different things and understand that you're not failing at this. You're just using your resources so that you can succeed when you get to medical school.
Along those same lines of using your resources, I think it's really important for students to take advantage of everything that they have available on their campus when it comes to, not just the educational support services, but all of the other ways to get involved. You will be surrounded by extremely intelligent people across your entire medical school campus, and the faculty and the students that are just a year or so ahead of you, all of the valuable experiences that they have when it comes to joining a student club and serving in a leadership role and speaking at national conferences and being able to travel to Washington, D.C. with the deans, to be present on Capitol Hill when there's a specific day dedicated to medical students and medical school issues. Those types of experiences, I think sometimes students, it's a little surreal once they realize what opportunities they have available, and to be a first-year student or a second-year student and to be at the White House and to be able to do those types of things, all of that is at your fingertips, and it's up to the students to get involved on campus in all the different organizations and the leadership roles and really take advantage of what you have and start building your network early on.
I think you need to also evaluate how you learn the best. Every medical school has to teach you the same thing because, that's the law. Like, we can't just go on our own and start, teaching you, I don't know, how to take care of your car in medical school, because that's not really what you're in medical school for. So every medical school is going to teach you the same thing. The difference comes with what opportunities are available for you at that medical school and how do they disseminate the information to you. So think about how you learn the best. If you're a student that thrives sitting in a lecture hall and soaking up the information presented to you like a sponge and then squeezing it out on the test day, great, there are medical schools that do that, so seek out those schools. Other students love being in small group environments, doing case-based, problem-based education, where they are given like, quote unquote, like a patient on paper and they have to kind of work through the diagnosis. Lots of schools have different hybrid curriculums. Vanderbilt has a very unique curriculum, our Curriculum 2.0. So think about how you learn the best. We are not the right medical school for everyone. That's why there's lots of other medical schools out there. So I think it's important for you to know yourself backwards and forwards and be honest. Sometimes we'll have students that will apply to us because, they're looking for kind of that, big name medical school, but it might not be the right fit for them. So know that. Also think about, kind of like what they said, what opportunities. Think about what opportunities you want to take advantage of in medical school. Seek out what kind of medical electives that medical school has to offer. Do they offer joint degrees? You know, a lot of medical schools are trying to educate future physicians instead of kind of the current model. And so look for maybe medical schools that are more on the cutting edge for that. So I think that's kind of something that in my former life before I became director of admissions, I was a pre-med advisor for 15 years, and I would have students that were just so desperate to get into medical school. They didn't really care where it was. They just wanted to get in somewhere. But really be selective and be intentional on where you're applying.
Thank you. This next question is again for all the panelists, and we'll start with Mr. Dickerson. If an applicant does not get accepted, what is the best way to determine what parts of the application need work?
Unfortunately, we don't have individual feedback or counseling. I think once upon a time when we did, particularly when our pools were a little smaller, we were able to provide those opportunities. And so what we're doing now at the University of Colorado School of Medicine is actually developing a self-assessment tool that students can actually examine what they presented in terms of an application, and then also how our typical not only applicant but matriculants, how they typically look in terms of their involvements, look in terms of the hours they've committed to service, et cetera. And so we're working on that component, as well as we provide what's called informational sessions. And so for students that actually weren't offered seats, we provide a workshop, a session that actually is based on the inquiries of the students. And so they'll ask specifically, you know, about elements of the application, and our expectations, and we actually cater conversations surrounding those who are actually present in those respective sessions. And so I do know the value of the individual feedback. I wish we had, first of all, staffing and time to provide that. But many times students will connect with us and have direct questions. We're finding that this is the better tool for us because our pool is just expanding in such a way. And so a self-assessment tool that we're developing in addition to educational sessions surrounding the application packet and how they compare to matriculating students.
That sounds like a great idea. We usually advise people to wait at least one other cycle before reapplying, not just reapplying with the same exact application. Although a lot of the people who are not accepted are perfectly qualified and fine people and will get into medical school eventually. Taking that time to not reapply with the same exact application, but to enhance your application in whatever way. I think you can probably look at your application and figure out what areas you might be a little bit weaker in, whether you want to take a couple of additional courses to prove that you can handle the science work or take some time and do some research or clinical work. Anything you do is going to help. And, you know, when we do advise students, one of the things we always say is, I know that it's hard not getting in that first time, but many students that have reapplied to us say, I never would have done X if I had gotten in right away. And this is what makes me such a better applicant and such a better physician in the end. And really, that's what it's all about. So even if you don't get in, know that what you can do with that time can still help you in your journey and still be really valuable.
Great comments coming down. At Creighton, we actually encourage students to contact us because, once again, we feel every case is different. So we will review your application with you and tell you where we see weaknesses, what weaknesses we see, and then we encourage you to utilize the resources at the other schools. So if they will work with you one-on-one, or if they have the different programs like they mentioned here, use those resources so you can get a global view of your application. You might see it one way, but as admissions officers, we all see it differently based on our mission and who we want to bring in for our institution. So utilize those resources. That's probably the best way for you to really enhance your application. And then also your pre-health advisors, they're awesome. They know what you need to do to get in. And if they feel like there's a weakness, talk to them and ask them how you can enhance that or fix that weakness too. They're a great resource for you also, in addition to the different schools and how we work with you one-on-one or groups or so on and so forth.
We would also encourage students to contact us for feedback if they're denied admission. We spend quite a bit of time actually providing feedback for students, and number one thing that I can recommend that a student do, other than apply earlier possibly in the cycle, is take the feedback that you're given seriously. And when you do reapply, the admission committee will be looking to see what you have done differently, what is different between last year's application and this year's application, especially if we've given you specific feedback on something that you can improve. If you haven't done that exact thing, or even made an attempt, that's a little bit of a red flag. We took the time to provide the feedback, and we take that quite seriously, and we really do notice when a student then takes the time to improve that specific aspect of their application.
If a student receives a secondary and is declined, we're more than happy to talk with him or her about what they can do to increase the strength of their application for a following application cycle. Like it was stated, it doesn't necessarily mean it would be the immediate, following application cycle. It might mean that there might be a year to work on strengthening your application before reapplying. But I think it's important that candidates don't compare themselves to others and get down on themselves with things like, gosh, I didn't get into medical school, but Becky did, and my GPA was higher than hers, and my MCAT score was higher than hers, and, it's not fair or whatever, because we're looking to create a diverse class. Okay, and so that's the reason why we don't have cookie cutter prescriptions of, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to get accepted, And so sometimes when a student asks for feedback, sometimes there's really not much that we can say because they did everything that they were supposed. They're a great candidate. It was just we had a lot of great candidates. And that's sometimes hard to hear. So I believe with the rolling admissions, getting your application out sooner rather than later is one of the more proactive steps. And we don't give out trophies for people who get accepted the first time they apply to medical school. So you don't have to worry about missing that opportunity. No trophies are given. So if you aren't accepted the first time you apply, it's not held against you when you reapply at Vanderbilt. We are excited about what opportunities you've taken advantage of in that transition year.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so if you please give a round of applause to our distinguished panelists. And we'll begin our second admissions panel shortly. Thank you.